Hey everybody, it's Bud and Melody coming to you from our in-home cathedral that you can kind of see. What we're going to do today is talk about why in the world we're doing a series on Lamentations, because that's what's coming up next. This very next Sunday, we're starting Lamentations 1, and it could be a little heavy.
It's fine holiday fun.
Yeah, this is a good lead into Advent. Actually, that's one of the reasons I don't remember if we have it listed or not, but Advent's all about the arrival of Christ and hope there, but there's some stuff we got to deal with before we get there. So we're going to take a brief break from the lectionary, because this is not where we're at in the lectionary at all. We're going to take a brief break and get into Lament. So why in the world are we doing that, Mel?
I think it's a great idea. I feel really good about it.
I'm glad. But why really are you wanting to do that?
I don't know. For reals, I don't know if you guys have been up to what's been happening in our world, but 2020 has been a rough year, has it not?
I'd say so.
Yeah. Just to name a few, what's been going on in 2020?
Well, nothing really comes to mind. I mean,
you're not playing along with me.
Well, let's say the P word. What's that called again? The pandemic?
There it is.
That's something. Yeah?
Yeah.
What else?
Well, can we just talk about the pandemic for a little bit?
Because I think I wanted to move past it because it's going away.
See?
Like magic.
It's not though. That's the thing.
Ooh. Okay.
Cool.
Okay. So thankfully Melody stopped me, and through the magic of editing, you didn't get everything that came after my it's going away like magic. So
yeah,
let's get back to it. So pandemic.
The pandemic. So there's a lot to lament because of this pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. People have lost their lives. People have struggled with their health. There have been people who have had COVID and had what looks like to be lasting effects on their body because of the virus. We have people who have lost their jobs. We have people who have lost just a sense of normalcy, right? And one of the main things that we've struggled with as a family is just the isolation. And I love my children dearly, but we have been with them in the home since March of 2020. And
so much of the children.
So much of them, and we're used to a little bit of a break. And so, and to have community, to be able to see our friends, to be able to not have to be careful with one another or bump elbows to say hello or bow and curtsy, which is sometimes fun to do, and wear masks and not be able to see people's whole faces and all of those things that we've lost because of the pandemic. And we need to learn how to lament that. And it is ongoing and it is still happening. And I think that we need something to be able to reckon with this really difficult time.
Yeah, because I think our tendency is we want to move past. I mean, we're seeing that with people now. It's like, can we be done with the pandemic? People are just tired, so they think that makes that makes it go away. I'm tired of wearing a mask, so I'm not going to wear a mask anymore. And that's because we don't know how to deal with the trauma and the pain of something this substantial.
Yeah, I was listening to NPR, and they were interviewing a health professional, and he was saying, a lot of people are saying, I'm really done with this virus. Well, unfortunately, the virus isn't done with us. And I thought that was such a profound statement. Yeah. We're not done with this yet. We have to keep going. And not only that, I think the pandemic has really revealed some weaknesses, and here I'm talking about the church specifically, in our churches, in how to have church at a distance, safely, caring for one another still. And I think in a way it's been kind of beneficial, and it's sort of shaken the church down. It's been an unveiling, if you will, of some of the ways we depended on the building and the structure and like the programs as the church rather than the people who make up the church. And so I guess that would maybe be a benefit, but I think it's something that we still need to reckon with and be honest about and look it in the face. And we'll talk more about that as we move on.
You use the word unveiling, but apocalypse, right?
Apocalypse.
Everybody is kind of joking, like, is this the end times? Because we all go to, that type of thought. But apocalypse actually means the unveiling.
An unveiling, right.
Yeah.
I preached a whole sermon on it. You can check it out, go back and listen. But apocalypse really, I would argue, is the end of something. And I think it's the end of the way we've done church to this point. And it's a time to reckon and the promise of new life that comes after that ending, the promise of new beginning. So, yeah. So what else? 2020, rough year. What else
so
comes to mind?
You're quizzing me. Pandemic was one thing. Racial injustice. That
Floyd?
That just started this year. Racial injustice.
Correct. Right? Yes, 2020. No, it's even hard to joke about it. I can't even get the words out.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that, because of the pandemic, because we've been so dependent on social media during this time to just to feel like we're connected to something, we've been able to witness real systemic injustice in a new way. I said to Bud, I think it's gotten quiet enough for us to really be able to listen to the injustices. You know, we just like back to back, we had Ahmaud Arbery video come out, we had what happened with Breonna Taylor come out, and then we had that 8-minute just gut-wrenching video, which I actually couldn't even watch, of George Floyd being murdered just right on a camera. And I think what has been happening, you know, for centuries has finally caught up with us as a society. And I think that COVID and the pandemic is part of what's made that happen. I'm a historian at heart, so I'm always thinking about causes and effects. And I think had the pandemic not happened, I'm not sure that there would be as a unified outcry as I've seen, where we have such a diverse group of people. And when I say diverse, I mean like people of color and white folks who are all realizing the injustices and are being much more vocal about them than it has been previously. Something is happening. And like the pandemic has brought the whole globe together. There have been people across the globe supporting the theological statement that Black Lives Matter and supporting the United States and the cry for police reform. And that's been incredible. And I don't think we would have seen that global unity without the global pandemic. So again, it's weird to say that there's good coming out of this pandemic, but God's using terrible things, I think, to bring some good out of it. Yeah, and it's empowered other countries to have their own protests against government brutality, police brutality, whatever their form of government is. And so this is a more of that collective protest. But what looking that injustice in the face does, I think, is make us come face to face with the honest realities of our history as America, because we know that this isn't new, that it didn't start in 2020. And so how do we reckon with that? What's a healthy way to come to the death of what we thought was our history, I guess is a good way to say that. So another reason, I think, to study Lamentations. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because as we'll see in the coming weeks, it's not just lamenting something that's personally happened to you, although that's part of it. But there's a lament for the city or for the nation. There's a lament for the people, and there are things as local communities, as a broader community, as America, that we need to lament, like how we founded this country. And while things like that may have been accepted at the time, we can say without a doubt that those are inherently evil, and even those accepted in the time, it should never have been. Should never have been. So we can lament that now, and we're going to be learning more about how to do that. So I have one more thing from 2020. Okay. But I want you to see if you can guess what it might be that's happening in 2020 that's making it a rough year. Well, I've got the notes right here. I'm going to pretend. That's cheating. It's the elections. It is the elections. This is also, just like we just found out about racial injustice, we just found out about partisanship.
and how divided this country is.
Please note the sarcasm in Bud's voice right now.
The lazy man's humor, sorry.
Bud and I have recently been reflecting on, we spent our first year of pastoring through the 2016 elections. I was a first year, y'all, and it was rough. It was rough, but I think this one's worse.
Somehow.
I feel like this one's, it's not better, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's worse.
But hey, the good thing is we've got one old white guy to choose between another old white guy that we get to vote for here in a couple of weeks. So that's a benefit too.
Yeah. I'm just gonna move right along there with that one.
I'm just the comedic relief today.
There's division, and it's extreme division that we have right now, and I think a lot of that has to do with misinformation. There's this, and we've slowly been moving towards it, I think, with each election, but it's this idea that first, we don't know how to have healthy discourse with people we disagree with, and that's been true for a while. I hope you can't hear my kids screaming in the background because they're being very loud.
They're having fun though.
So you just get that joy in the background. We don't know how to have civil discourse. And it's slowly been moving closer and closer to, if you vote for this person, you are evil on one side, and on this side it's, if you vote for this person, you are evil. And so there does not seem a way for us to be able to have any sort of unity, and one could argue there's never been unity, and I believe somewhat in that, but we've gotten, and it's happening in the church, and I think that's what grieves me the most, is that it's happening in the church, in the place where we should be able to stand in unity with one another, not uniformity, but unity amidst the diversity of thought. And we've just gotten to a place where we don't do that well. We don't know how to have conversations without feeling, I think, threatened by somebody else's belief system. And sometimes it's warranted, because sometimes our belief systems lead to oppression. And so, of course, in those moments, we need to be righteously angry and speak truth in love to one another. But there are times where it's sort of outside of that and into the minutia of what a person believes to be Christianity, and we get very ugly and angry, and we then villainize, and we say it's us versus them, not realizing that it's all us. And so we need to, again, learn how to lament that disunity, learn how to lament and grieve what's been lost because of what's happening in our culture right now, and the way the media and the political parties and everything has just sort of like fed into this discord that's happening.
Yeah, that disunity is lamentable. We know that God is a God of unity. Spirit brings about unity, so disunity is anti-God, is anti the way of Christ, and so that's worth lamenting. That's real. So just we will love you no matter who you vote for. I encourage you, though, to pray. Let Jesus inform your politics, because it's not two separate things. I won't get on that soapbox, but I just want to throw that out there.
That's good, Beth. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Were you not going to pray before you voted?
I mean, I am. I'm actually commending you for leaving it where you left it.
Oh, right on. I see.
And stepping off of the soapbox.
I've been spicy since Sunday, for those who joined. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so that's 2020. I know there's a lot of other things. Like you said, there's been a lot of different levels of grief for people, losing jobs, losing loved ones, people directly affected by the racial injustice, people losing friends and family due to this political climate that we're in. But so we know we're going to lament all that stuff and more, but why is it so weird for us to lament? Like, why is this such a foreign word to us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm going to get spicy for a little bit. Are you ready?
As long as I can pull back too.
You can.
Okay.
I'm also going to put my historian hat on for you guys. You're welcome.
History time with Melody.
Yay! American Western Christians don't know how to do lament. We just don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. We've not been taught how to do that. We are always winning. Like the motto of America could be always be winning, right? That's just what we want to do. And if we can take a look back as sort of an overview of our history, we see that except for the Civil War, in which we all sort of lost, but we remained a nation, the United States has not really lost any sort of conflict that has happened against themselves. So we think about, I'm going to bring up like Germany as an example, and the Holocaust and Hitler and all of that was happening. So in comes the Allied forces, and Germany and Hitler are defeated, and we come awake to the atrocities of the Holocaust, and Germany is like leveled in a sense and brought to their knees in humility for the atrocities that they did. They're still rebuilding from that. But they lost. They had a real loss. And, you can go to Germany and see stones that are placed for Jews who were lost in the Holocaust during that time. And you have these sort of memorials just out there. They're a country who's experienced loss. Okay, America doesn't have that. We were part of the Allied forces that defeated Germany. When we go into conflict with other nations, we come out the winners. We come out the superpowers. We come out the ones who have defeated whatever it is that we feel so strongly that we need to fight against. And so we don't know how to reckon with loss. And I think even the times where you could argue that we have lost, like
in Vietnam.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. We have the whole memorial set up for it. The history books sort of tell us we didn't lose, we just decided to leave. But we didn't lose,
We took our ball and went home.
Right, exactly. So it's not really a loss. And, of course we have this memorial, but we sort of, in the history books, it's not a story that we tell as the U.S. losing. And when people try to give another narrative of the Vietnam War, it's really protested. People get very emotional when we are critical of what happened in the Vietnam War, because we're America. We always win, always be winning, right? And so we're taught this triumphalism, but we're not taught how to lament. We're not taught how to deal with grief and loss, because we never did it and we never do it, because that's not what Americans do, right? We prize the individual, and we prize the individual who is working, who produces something. So if we take time to lament, that's time taken away from producing something, therefore your value is lost. So we don't even give our people time to lament, because if you're lamenting, then you're not producing. So words like suck it up, be productive, there's work to be done, stop whining, you're just wallowing, are things that it's the narrative that is spun for us. I've said those words to people, and those words have been said to me personally, and I think collectively as a nation we all resonate with that. So that's sort of my short history lesson about why I think American Christians don't know how to lament, because we don't have time for that nonsense. Move on, move past it. It's a part of our history, sure, but like we're past that now, so let's just keep moving on.
You mentioned suck it up. That was definitely a phrase that I used a lot, and I don't think my dad meant it malevolently or anything, but I think most of us who've grown up in America have heard that phrase, suck it up, and definitely coaches playing sports. But you also mentioned about people being told they're wallowing in their pain, or they're wallowing in whatever happened. Just move on, just get going and be productive again. And I remember when my dad passed, how so many people told us how amazed and impressed they were with us for being so strong. And all we were doing was we were being stoic. We weren't allowing and there were waves of it, but we weren't allowing us to feel that full wave of emotion that comes with that significant loss. And I'll tell a little bit more of my story in week 4 when I'm preaching. But I didn't know how to lament. I don't even really know how to grieve. Just now learning that, and what we found through our study and just through living life and dealing well and not well with trauma like this is realizing that I'm not a complete human being. I'm not a whole human being when I only try to rejoice and I ignore the grief and I ignore the need for lament. I ignore pain. There's an entire side of me that I'm suppressing. So part of lament is becoming a whole human, I think. And with that comes the pain. Like what do we do with it? That's kind of the first natural steps. Like, okay, if I'm going to lament, I'm stepping into this real pain, this real trauma that happens. So what do I do? And I love what Richard Rohr says. He says that pain either needs to be transformed or it will be transferred onto another person. And so going through lament is allowing God to enter into that pain with you, because we know that God never leaves us nor forsakes us. God's always with us. So even when we're the ugliest part of that grief and lament, we know God's there, and we're trusting somehow in the way that only God can do it. God's going to transform that pain and that grief into something beautiful, so that it doesn't fester within us and then get transferred onto another person.
Yeah, why do you think that we put off that belief that, like, if we lament, I don't know, I guess maybe I'm answering my own question, but this idea, especially for me specifically, I'll speak for myself, but if I lament, that means I'm being honest that I'm angry with God, that I'm being honest with how I really feel about a situation. But doesn't that say that, like, we don't have faith in God? I feel like that's what I was taught growing up. Like, that was the narrative. Like, if you lament, if you're honest with your pain, then you have, like, zero faith. And, like, just talk to me about, like, maybe how that's not true.
That's not true.
Thank you.
That's not true. But I think part of it, and I can only speak for my experience, which I think is largely a product of evangelicalism. And I know we talked about this the other night, but just the fact that we start with this brokenness and this sin, and God needs to deal with you and then move you into this all-consuming love of God. But we start with sin and brokenness. And so there's this aspect of, like, before God, there's all brokenness and sin and pain and all these things. Or we could say on the other side of the cross, we're on the other side of the cross, right? Yeah. It's like, we are also, it's already and not yet. Also, the world sucks sometimes. Yeah. And sometimes it's just BS, the stuff that happens to us. So there's this duality to it. It's like, okay, well, you meet Jesus, you get all fixed up, and then now everything's great, but things aren't always great. Yeah. And so it's portrayed as a lack of faith. But what I've been learning, and read a book, Interior Freedom, actually right before we found out about Melody's brain tumor. And what I've been learning it is the most faithful of moves to say, I've got this stuff, this grief, this pain, this grossness in me, whatever it is, and I'm offering it to you, God, knowing that you are the only one who can do anything with it. It's this idea of consenting to those things that you don't have any control over, because you know that God's still there with you, and God's going to do something. It's not resignation. That's a passive thing. Like, well, I can't do anything. But it's consenting to, okay, God, I've got nothing here. Wow. You do something. And so it's absolutely 100% faith move to do that. I think it's a lack of faith to not give those things to God. And like I said, we're just beginning to learn the fullness, the depth of this whole thing.
Yeah, so where does that leave us then? Or where does that take us, I guess, is a better question with this. Like, so we've sort of established why we're doing this series on lament and what's been going on in our world, and how we have been taught a narrative that lament isn't healthy. So where do we move on from here? Because you say lament is absolutely healthy, and it's living into our fullness as human beings. So, like, how do we do that, and how do we move forward as we sort of delve deeper into these chapters in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it begins with honesty, honestly acknowledging the feelings that you have.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of woo-woo, right? Especially there's a false sense of masculinity that we have when we're more stoic and we don't acknowledge our feelings. But it begins with honesty, because we know that God knows anyway.
Yeah.
God knows what's going on in our hearts. God knows what we're thinking.
Yeah.
God knows the words before we say them. So it begins with honesty, and there's something that happens in us when we are honest with ourselves, that then and we're honestly offering something to God. There's I guess a joining of the heart, so to speak, because if we think of ourselves not being fully human when we're suppressing things, we're opening up our hearts when we're honest like that, and we're joining with God and saying that God is the only one that can do anything with this. So let's give it to God and let God do something.
Yeah.
And one of the notes that we have here, I love this, but going back to the idea that it's a lack of faith to lament, or a lack of faith to grieve or feel this pain. As we said, it's not. But the false narrative that when we're saying everything's great, when we're living triumphalistic that everything's great, that we're really defending the power of God, that no, God's got everything under control. But the truth is, God also doesn't need us to defend God. God is all powerful, all knowing. So for us to use that triumphalistic narrative is something that God's not even asking us to do.
Yeah.
Like, yes, rejoice when there's something to rejoice about, but also weep when you need to weep. And God's safe. God's not threatened by that.
Yeah, I was going to say, God's not threatened by our honesty. I think you said it so beautifully. It's almost a respect and a oneness with God, to acknowledge all of our humanity before God, knowing that God is there and created all the emotions anyway. So why are the sad ones bad and the happy ones good? Which is that dualism that we try to stay away from. Like all of our emotions were created by God. So how do we lament as something that was a gift from God? So how do we do that in a healthy way? And I think that's key in all of this, is to do it in a healthy way. And I don't know, I think there might be a book that shows us how to do that.
Oh, this is another quiz portion, isn't it? I think there is, because it's the book we've been reading for months, preparing for
not
this.
That book, another book.
Oh no, the Bible?
Ding,
Wait,
ding,
it's a
ding.
specific book in the Bible.
The one
It
that's
is.
meant so much to you.
Lamentations.
I was actually thinking of the Psalms.
Oh dang! How did I fail that quiz?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just know that the Psalms have been beneficial for you
Yeah.
as you've dealt with your own grief.
No, that's
and
real.
To see,
That's
the
real.
majority of the Psalms are laments. They're songs of lament, and yet we don't want to deal with those.
Yeah, it's about half and half, and
Yeah.
there's actually a Psalm 88, which quick you'll get more of this later. But most laments have some kind of turn to hope toward the end. All of the lament psalms except for one have that turn to hope, and it's Psalm 88, and it just leaves you hanging, like sometimes happens in life. You're just left like, well, I've still got questions, and there's nothing left.
Yeah.
So
and Lamentations ends that way too. It's sort of like a minor key. Well, sorry. But
no, you're absolutely right. When I was dealing with the grief of my father, and again, I'll tell more of that story later, but finding that the Psalms were all praise. The Psalms were a lot of pain, a lot of shaking that angry fist at God, like, where the heck are you?
Yeah.
And you made these promises to me, yet you're nowhere to be found. What do I do with this? So, Lamentations, the Psalms, there's more in there, but those are two good places to start.
Yeah. Okay, now to the book that was
Okay,
moving to. Our preaching team, it's fine. We're doing a great job.
I'm failing your quizzes. It's not good.
You can't read my mind?
Not yet.
All right. Anyway, our preaching team has been preparing for a couple of months now. We've read both Lamentations and a book, and it's this book. It's called Prophetic Lament, and it's a beautiful book, and it walks through all 5 chapters of Lamentations. I'm showing it to you because if you want to read it, a lot of our information for our sermons is coming from this book, and this has been helpful. I know for Bud, it's been helpful for me. It's been helpful and really, interestingly enough, life-giving for our preaching team to walk through some of the walk through and wrestle with this it's a really hard text, you guys, and yet I think we're all feeling encouraged that that there's so much there that we can wrestle with and that we can learn, and that it's almost like I'm excited about the fact that we don't have all the answers, and we get to sort of dive in together and have this dialogue. As a preaching team, we really enjoyed dialoguing together as we planned out this sermon series, and I'm looking forward to dialoguing with our community about what we learn as we jump into this, because it's almost opened up more questions for me and less answers. And that can be frustrating at times, and I've wrestled with that too. But also this idea that there's so much more out there. It's been a humbling experience. That's the word.
Yeah.
Just I don't know all the things, and I don't have this all wrapped up in a bow. And yet there's hope, and yet there's Advent that comes on the heels of this lament. So we're really looking forward to sharing this series with you, with little glimpses of hope throughout.
Yeah. And so 25 minutes on a Sunday morning, there's no way that we can cover everything that happens in Lamentations 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're just doing 5 weeks that way. So if this is a topic that interests you, or if you are maybe starting to acknowledge some pain in your life that you haven't dealt with, encourage you to grab the book and read along with us, because there's a lot that stirred in me from this. And I'm sure that not just the sermons, but even the book, if you do choose to read along, there'll be a lot that stirs in you as well. So I love how you're ending on that message of hope, that there is hope through all of this. And even if we end up with more questions than answers, God's still there with us, sitting in those questions with us.
And that is our hope.